May yesterday, last night. The MA that I'm giving, the Media Arts Philosophy Practice one, the Untimely Meds. It's my short version of it. See where I'm coming from. Anyway, untimely medications is what I'm going to start calling it. Anyway, the printer didn't work. Then the printer did work, and it was just spewing out like, you know, and I couldn't remember what words were. I was like so tired. I was replacing words with other words. It was just sad. The whole thing was just pathetic. I thought, okay, I just have to like go to sleep, and then wake up. Okay. Do you want the lights on or off? Oh, okay. This is such a not hard decision. Okay, so Lauren, where you're sitting is a light. Can you just turn that on? I mean, I think atmosphere helps. Hello. Right there on the side. Yeah, that.
Is it off at the wall?
And then you can turn off the wall. That would be brilliant. That's it. That's it. What do you think? Is that too dark? Mark, what do you think? Is it okay? Did you say it was trippy?
No.
Oh. See, that's the other thing I do. I just make up what I hear. That's right. That's what makes you a nice, you know, storyteller. Okay, let's begin. We keep having like a core group and then sort of a slightly changing group, which is fine. Steve Goldhoff couldn't come today. He's normally here now. And who else has sent their apologies?
Jacqueline said she was sorry as well. She's teaching.
Right, okay. So she's not able to come. I don't know if there's Katie is coming, but she's going to start, you know, Katie the Lacanian Katie is coming, starting, I think, next week. Is her story. Is there anybody else that we're missing?
Last week?
Oh, Natalia, yeah.
Natalia, so.
Yeah, and, okay, yes, she's coming. Has anybody heard from Samira by any chance?
No.
Okay. Good. All right, I'll check on that. Right. Okay. Okay, I think we've got everybody here for the time being. Good. We're gonna go around one time. Introduce you. Oh, Alberto's not here. I knew there was something. He wasn't able to make it today. And Francesca is supposed to be here as well. She's supposed to be coming now. No. Francesca, not Francesco. Okay, so why don't we just go around again? And if you don't mind, this way we keep remembering names. Andre, could you open the window? I want. I'm really excited about the seminar now that we're doing the alchemy, and we're going to start with questions of time and metaphysics and everything. It's very exciting. Why don't you introduce yourself? Since you've now been talking the last 2 hours, you just go on the roll. Okay, name.
Oh, name. Mattia. So I'm switching from one argument to the other, so that's why I'm thinking about it. Well, I've been working already for a while on the notion of emergence that comes from complexity theory, which is a branch of physics that has spread all over. It's valuable, but applicable to various different disciplines, as a good tool to understand the logic that make the dimensions of art making come to the surface or arise. In terms of art being singularity, or something that is not representing but is not computable before, and therefore it's always only what it is. A good example I came up with last week is that one can have science fiction and one cannot have art fiction, because as soon as one makes something as if it were an art that doesn't yet exist, immediately one expands art to that point. So it is a constantly growing definition, or an incomplete definition, that art has.
But I still have to challenge you on this, because I still think you could only have art fiction.
Yes. Or vice versa. I mean,
Okay, you can not have it or have it. But you can't have both.
You cannot have, you cannot have both. But art, and to the extent that art is You can say this always fictional, as in it doesn't need proof. It doesn't want to represent reality. It's not mimetic, and it's beyond aesthetic at this point.
I'm going to stop you there because we're going to get into that today anyway. Thanks.
I'm Demetrios. You can call me Ben if you want. I teach here on the art and design course. I'm also an artist, and currently working on a project which is all about simulation training for preparing for real-world disaster management. And it started off through looking at the Casualties Union, which were an organisation who act as casualties for the police, for the fire brigade. But now we're looking into it from the virtual side of simulation training. And particularly interested in this idea of the suspension of disbelief and the role of theatre involved in that, in real-world training. And we're working with two
Do you mean the suspension of belief or the suspension of disbelief?
suspension of disbelief, that there is within the training scenario you are immersed to the point where you feel that you are in a real world situation.
Oh, I see. So you're suspending the fact that you're in a false environment.
That's right.
Okay. So therefore you're suspending belief.
Okay.
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 Or disbelief. I get it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. That's a neat.
So yeah, transferring some kind of bit there.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Stuart.
That's good. Good start.
Second year part-time MA Fine Art. Currently sort of working on my interview presentation tomorrow's PhD interview, and I'm essentially trying to revitalise British Romanticism, British Romantic landscape art, but making it appropriate for the digital age. And what else can I
No, no, that's good.
Is that
That's good.
should I
Yeah.
stop there? Yeah.
We're going to stop there, but don't forget, in tomorrow's situation,
Yes, I will be.
that you have, you sort of mentioned Constable and
Yes.
Turner and
I've got beaches.
good.
Thank you.
The little-
I'm Dane, I'm a PhD student here. My research focuses on the role that real-time systems play in developing an understanding of art via its own intelligence, its own sense, via feedback and mechanisms that operate on a different understanding of time when there is no real time per se.
But you're working on real-time systems and
Yes,
stuff.
that's right, yeah.
Okay.
And trying to use those to develop a different methodology for dealing with time in that sort of framework. So I'm looking at machinic languages.
Siri not available.
All right, machine language. That was really good. This is a group thing.
Looking at wild wanderings in software spaces, developing,
Put down
being
a
able
toy.
to deal with algorithmic information theory in terms of artwork as well. My art practice itself is in video, sound, and multimedia. It's a mixture of them. At the moment I'm working with sound mostly. I've been trying to program my drum machine and it's not working, which is fun.
Good. Thanks.
Yes, I'm Lauren. Oh,
Hello, everybody.
I'm not Lauren. My name is Lauren. So I forgot. Yes, my current working title is The Work of Art and Dispossession of Events.
Unbelievable. It's fantastic.
Yes, it's been that for a while. But
Is it? I thought it was always the event.
No, is that we're working on the 9R.
Oh, that's fantastic. You were going to do 9R.
No, I don't like the work of art.
Yeah, come on in.
But didn't go back to one.
That's right. Don't worry. Just going around the room.
So I'm busy at the moment I was sort of concentrating on the analytic of the sublime, and the notion of dispossession, but how that relates to Heidegger's The Forgotten. So I punished myself with rereading Identity and Difference again at the weekend. Well, I didn't quite get
Excellent.
through it, but I got
You
through
might need to
some
think
more
about
notes.
getting out more there.
Oh, and I reread the Bremen lecture 1, and I think I reread the introduction. Oh, it's just like, yeah, it was punishing, but then I found, I was trying to sort of pull out those quotes for this exercise I'm doing, and I did come across the bit which was, he refers to, like, he refers to a work, so it could be a work of philosophy. It wasn't specific to the work of art, but he does say the work, and he, in relation to the notion of the imposter, which I'd pinpointed it before, but I'd forgotten, and so that was it was good that it sort of stood out as a sort of little section for what I think is going to link in with what I'm exploring. So that was but this coming weekend I have to finish the second part again of difference, because I didn't quite get all through it with my punishment exercise.
Excellent. Okay, that's good. When you're speaking, it reminded me of something I'm going to pass around. We are now, for whatever reasons, I'm not sure why, the BA crowd is taking its time selecting the people to do X, Y, and Z. So they've now asked me to send a list around with your names, the areas you would like to teach if you want to teach, or do studio visits, and the levels you would like to be engaged with, 1 through, level 4 is the first year, level 5 is the second year. I don't know why they did this, but they did. Okay, it used to be level 1 was level 1. Now level 1 is now level 4. Anyway, and the MA is level 7. Okay, so and then put your email and phone number if you want to be involved. Okay, thank you, Lauren.
I'm Tamsin. I'm on the MA part-time year 1, and I'm interested in water and processes of dissolving and obliterating and disappearing and oblivion, and I'm playing about with some photography tomorrow.
Oh, good. There's a person who you should look at, his work you should look at. He's Australian, and his name is not on my head, it's perfect, but his work is called something, he does a project called Turbulence. I can't believe I can't think of his name. And he wrote a book called something like Cultural Materialisms, and his work is all about water. He's very interesting, really interesting guy. And I will remember his name by the end of this seminar. And I'm sorry that I forgot your name, but you're not forgotten.
Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm doing MA Media Arts Philosophy Practice full time. At the moment, I'm preparing for my PhD interview as well. I'm decoding the curve of the young female body, and I've been doing it in lots of different forms this week. I've done a latex skin and a copper body and a foot and a hand as well. So I'm just sort of playing about
Bring
with
the foot. Do you have the foot with you?
It's upstairs.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
I can get it. If you want.
No, we'll wait. That's good. That's great.
Yeah, and I've done them in different forms. So I've done like the stone and plaster to see the difference between the sort of graininess of the stone compared to the smoothness of the plaster.
Mm.
And then I'm going to do them in possibly in wax as well, just to get the different material forms. Yeah, and I did a film. So, yeah.
Under off hour. Yes. Great. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Oscar. I used to work with photography and video, but now I don't know anymore. But I'm interested in the idea of subjectivity.
Welcome to being a PhD.
More specifically in the idea of prestige in the digital era.
Okay. Good. That's slightly different than last week. That's good. Yeah, that's nice. Okay. Mark?
What's the name? I'm some guy who crept in under the wire to do something, sometime, someplace. Is that vague enough?
That's too vague.
Too vague.
Yeah.
The question?
Who are you?
Mark. What's an expert?
What do you do?
What do? I kind of look for cultural sublime objects. Culturally sublime, look for the cultural sublime.
Wow.
Hello, I'm Andre. I'm the Media Arts Philosophy Practice, year 1, 2 years. I had a meeting this afternoon with a photographer from BMO. Hopefully next week we'll go down to the museum's collection centre and maybe work my way in there to start making some explorations around the place. What's going to come of it, I have no idea at this point.
Great. That sounds good. Wait. Okay.
Hello, I'm still Gay Place this week. Not changed my name again since last week. I'm just starting the PhD course and I'm still waiting to be enrolled and I'm just getting appointment times from Henry and stuff. I'm mainly interested in identity and representations of the body within contemporary art and how they work together. And that's a rough idea of where my interests are.
It's great. Good. Go.
Hello, I'm Grace, and this week I've been looking at changes of dermographia, which was a test with historical patients, female patients, where they believed that the female body was more impressionable than the male body, so they used to gently stroke their skin and it would be raised. It only happens in, I think it was like 1 out of 300 people, they have a specific reaction which lasts for hours, and it meant that they could actually completely cover the body in pattern. But they like to write the word Satan on the back of the female body because they believe that this was a kind of a...
Again, had to get out more.
They believed that it was, if you had this reaction, that it meant that you were kind of, or you had a kind of supernatural link. But I'm interested in the patterning of the body because it links to how I've been playing around with the hiding of the body, how pattern can also it can hide and flatten something, but it also makes something very obvious. So there's a play between something being revealed and concealed at the same time, and how that can be read in imagery.
So would that be having something to do with camouflage and the technical, like military look, you know, that kind of,
Possibly.
which is obvious and then not obvious?
Yeah, it doesn't have there's no logic to it because it's all completely different. But
Right.
at the same time, we recognise it as a pattern. So it's to do with, like we were saying, ideas of how we actually project onto something or how we read it in a different way.
Those kind of patterns that are not patterns but patterns that don't, you know, they're not iterable patterns. First of all, that's what you were kind of talking about with your
series of one.
the series of one. But second of all, it comes from fractals. See, I knew that eventually you'd get into fractals. I know, sorry. Just so you know. Okay, good, thanks.
Jakub. I'm a PhD student. I really
That's
don't
it.
know what I'm doing. Well, okay. I've been looking at the translation as a motion, as a movement, as actually
As
translate.
a space motion, not emotion.
Oh, emotion. Sorry. Yes.
No, as an emotion or a motion?
Motion.
Okay.
As in actually doing this. Sorry, I'm
Yeah.
using your bottle. But,
That's right.
yes, that's a good idea. And actually, what we lose. I was thinking, can we lose something? And what is it being lost? So I started.
Fizz. Go ahead.
I'm losing fizz.
Yes.
I'm losing fizz. Whoa. I'm not losing fizz. I'm quite capable of producing fizz. But no, I'm joking. No, but the thing is, I started doing photographs.
This class is just going from bad to worse.
Yeah. I was thinking about that, and I kind of started doing photographs, and now I'm working on them because they are they need to be digitally manipulated a little bit, which I'm not very keen on taking photos. But I'm removing parts from a body, leaving a blank hole. I'm not sure what a blank hole is yet, but so I'm trying to take them out. I'm also working on a palimpsest, and what the palimpsest has to do with all
The
of
word
that.
you hate. The word you love to hate.
Well, I started to hate it, but then there was an exhibition last year, well, 2012, so 2 years ago. There was an exhibition called Love in Palimpsest. The exhibition was bad. Really not relevant to anything. But the title Love in Palimpsest I kind of came to like a lot. Love as something hidden and something very much itself on its own right, being somewhere there between those layers, and only those layers are capable of producing it in a way. Maybe that's the way I'm thinking about, but I don't know. So I'm looking at the palimpsest as well, which led me to I found a guy who did surface research, the philosophy surface research, who is also an artist, and he created a series of work over a 3-year period as a residency. Series of work which is written text, kind of repeated itself on top of each other until it kind of came to become a series of lines or series of kind of abstract thing that doesn't have to do anything with the original place. I kind of started to think about this and this losing bit as a translation and how much you lose and what comes out on the top of this. And can I reproduce that as well in a way of producing something multiple times until it loses itself completely and becomes something else, and you get to containing within itself all those layers. That way. Other than that, I'm listening to music. I like to dance around my underwear.
Oh, you did a lovely video that you put on Facebook.
What's a lovely video?
Yeah, the one with your slippers.
Oh yes,
Oh, I love
made
that
a video of after work and before sleep, which is me, my slippers, watching TV. Because I think watching TV is quite fun, and I like TV, and I don't have TV right now. Well, I have a TV as an object.
So what are you watching? You're just watching it.
I just put a shadow figure, so puppets and puppets. I invite people to, play in the frame of the. No, I don't have actual channels. I have DVDs and other things, and my pirate movies. They're free. They're not free. But they are free. And yeah, so I'm watching a lot of that, and that's about it.
And you're organizing the alchemy thing.
Apparently I am. It's there. I mean, I'm kind of. I'm not sure what's happening with that. I will keep on thinking about it, and I don't know. We had a meeting, but I will have a meeting with you about it.
Okay.
What exactly is happening? I think it's in a good way, but what way is it? I don't know.
Okay, that sounds good.
That sounds perfect. And, yeah, that's.
Thank you.
Name's Lee. I'm a researcher here at BIAD, CFAR, and I am concerned, I guess, with the idea of object experience and the way in which you can play around with touch and different methods of interacting with artwork.
Good.
The
nearest what?
That's as concise as I can get it.
I'm going to try and at some point get you to not be concise.
Wow.
Pull it out because you're very concise, so concise. Can anybody picture what Lee does?
No.
No. Say.
You touch marble. No, that's
No.
someone else.
That's somebody else.
He described it once. He does like really big installations that are tactile, like made out of fountains. And you
I use lots of textiles.
I use lots of towels.
No. Well, they are a bit like that. I use lots of textiles.
Well, this is where I thought you and Grace would actually have something in common, because the textiles you have in terms of wrapping the hidden bodies and all the rest of it, you do something kind of weird with these textiles as well.
Yeah, so they're all to do with the way in which you touch them, as well as visually. And the work that I'm working on now, that's kind of work that I've been doing over the last few years, and I'm kind of gradually progressing into new ways of working at the moment, which I tend to always concentrate on the actual material first, and then work out ways of working with that, and then that kind of outputs into objects. Really, most of the work that I do is contained on a wall, so it ranges from quite tiny pieces to absolutely enormous, and they're all about the experience of being with that object in some way, and how it's almost being there is unreproducible in many the moment I'm doing lots of stuff with cast resin, where I'm doing it in layers and layers and working in with those layers and actually embedding other objects and fabrics and paint and carving into it and then refilling those layers up with further layers of resin, and so you're building up so it's kind of like a three-dimensional structure kind of embedded within. Well, it's not a flat plane because it's stuff coming out of it as well. But again, it's designed to be
And
tough.
if it were a plane, flat or otherwise, would that plane be understood as a surface?
Well, the surface, it has multiple layers of surface. There is, you know, the back is the same as the front.
Do you
So
use clear casters?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, at the moment they're relatively small, but they're getting, over the next 12 months they're going to get bigger. I always start making small kind of maquettes of things. So I mean they're about the same, like 1/4 of the thing.
Interesting.
And they'll eventually go up to the size of double probably. So they're designed either to be against the wall or to literally be a three-dimensional object that will just kind of stand monolithically in the middle of a space. So.
Wow, wonderful. Okay, thanks.
I'm Francesco. I've been here some time ago, then I had a couple of months off. And I paint. Started using oil. I wrote a painting today.
That's great.
Which is like you go to a party and you feel a bit awkward because you don't know if you know everyone, so you bring something that says you're okay.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
Okay, looking at this painting, do you think he's okay?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it's okay.
Well, he's my cool friend.
Good.
And yeah, I agree about what Andrea said about Matthias said. So, saying that the painting is not representing something, but is actually it is.
It just is.
So I think yeah.
Good.
And yesterday I had this idea. I was thinking it's a bit unrelated, about two cavemen in a cave, looking at the walls, discussing about art.
I think it should be two cave women, just to be different.
Yeah.
Okay. So go ahead.
So yeah, they were discussing about how the art on the walls is and drinking a glass of wine. But I couldn't paint something like that. That's what I was thinking about. It's representation of something, which is more, for me, it's more about, you could write something about it, like a poem or a story. While when you paint, is more something that is.
Good. Okay. Sign this if you want. Are we ready to go? Ready to rock and roll? Okay. Oh, just a couple of announcements. Next Wednesday morning at 10:30. Please, if you can come to, I haven't put it out on the list yet, so you're the first to know about it. There's going to be the CFAR research meeting for the whole school. And at that meeting, I'm going to roll out the research budgets that we've been given and explain the structure that has been rolled out across BIAT, basically. And the short version is that there are, for those that can't make it, that there are 3 centers now. The centers are the ones that contain all the research money. So anything that you're wanting to do with respect to your research, you apply to one of those centers. Obviously, you're expected to apply to CFAR. It's got some teething problems, I mean a lot of teething problems, not the least of which is that sometimes you have a cross-disciplinary thing, so that gets a little complicated, but anyway, they'll figure that part out. Because of a number of reasons, which I've asked Simon Bolton, who's the Associate Dean, to come address the school directly, so that I'm not shot, because I'm just the messenger. They have decimated the research budgets so that CFAR was given £8,000, but 4,000 times 2 had been given out against anyone's knowledge for a different budget, and one artist was unbelievably wonderful and gave back what they hadn't used, this one, which was really great. So we actually have a little tiny bit of money, and the School of Art, I think we have altogether, I think we have about £6,000. I mean, when I say little, I mean little. And then the School of Art has £4,000. And so if you need money for your materials, for your research, and it's research that will help you either strengthen your PhD or get you started as an early career researcher or be somehow linked to the ref, so I'll explain in more detail on Wednesday, then there is money to apply for. I mean, obviously, this round, not a lot of money. You know, I think we're going to try and cap it around 250 or 300, something like that. And this round, I mean by July. Then apparently we get a new budget, which will be many thousands, but that isn't in my hands at the moment, so I can't impart it. So on Wednesday, we have to make a couple of strong decisions about how that meager amount of money is going to be divided. Are we going to put on conferences? Do you want a journal? I mean, what do you want to do with this money? Do you want it as individual things? So that's what we're going to talk about. And I will.
Is it an open meeting where this can be discussed, or
it's an open meeting.
Okay.
It's a real meeting. Yeah, I really want the school. I want it. I mean, we are the core researchers here, plus the three other CFAR researchers that are not here, and a couple of the PhD students that are not here. But basically, we're it, plus the PhD supervisors. That's the core researchers. But there's some people that are researchers that don't either realize they're researchers or have been not helped in the past. And I think that needs to be righted. That problem needs to be corrected. So that's what I'd like to do.
What are the other two centres?
Oh, sorry, yeah. The other one is the Center for, what's it called?
Design, creative.
Yeah, it's a CDCI, Center for Design and Creative Industry, and that is run by Professor Richard Coles, or Cole, I think, one Cole.
Coles, I think.
Is it Coles?
It is Coles, yeah.
It's plural Coles, okay. Coles, yeah. And the other one is called the Center for Making. It's still annoying me, but maybe I'm going to start liking it just because it annoys me so much, because it's a gerund and I just find it annoying. But it's called the Center for Making, and it's mainly out of jewelry. And I mean, I had a discussion with the director. Her name is Jivan Asflek, so Jivan Asflek, Astflack, something like that. That's probably wrong, but it's more or less correct. She was very opposed to the Tory move of reclassifying jewelry as a craft as opposed to an art. So I have no idea why in the end they decided to go with this term called making, which does have a craft sound to it. But maybe there's a way of bringing craft back to its rightful place. I mean, maybe that's the strategy. I don't know what the strategy is, but so those are the three areas, and and everybody has the same amount of non-money. I think jewelry has a little bit more than the others because they didn't actually have any research projects that went into this year, and also jewelry didn't exist as a center, so that was the other thing. But we did. Anyway, so that's the story so far. So if you have any good ideas, don't hold back. If you want to tell me before the meeting, that's even better. I'm going to send around to everybody the document. Don't flip out when you see the little men that they have, the figures of how it gets distributed. It's actually, I think, a glass of wine, sitting down with it, going, wow, look at those pictures, that's interesting. Something like that will help. And then I'll go through the whole thing. Okay, any other questions? On that, okay, the other series of dates you need to know about is on the 5th of February, the Imaginarium is opening. It's a 3-week festival of art, science, and shopping. They didn't put it this way, but that's how I put it. And it's with Selfridges. Beth Derbyshire, our other CFAR research fellow, is the one that's orchestrated this, and it's her sort of brain thing. The first seminar is going to be on the 5th. It's an opening on the 5th, and it's with this woman named Lucy Hawkins, who's the daughter of Stephen Hawkins. They only have 40 places available, and they're going to have it online. So if you're interested, and they won't allow anybody to come in, and they're not recording it because she's very well known, and her agents wouldn't allow it. So if you want to hear her, absolutely get online. It's going to be on the 5th, which is a Wednesday, I think, right? And it's at 5:30. It's at 5:30 to 8. So what I'm wondering is if not enough of you are able to break into it, then I'm not going. Okay, because I want to be with my people. But I'll go later. I'll go at 7, you know, when we finish. But if all of us end up getting on that list, then we'll just go there because she is a phenomenon. You know, she will be quite interesting. So that's the 5th. Okay.
Then I missed, but what do we sign up?
Where do they sign up for it? Is it on Eventbrite?
I'll send the link. You have to do it through the Selfridges website, so I'll send it out to you.
Thanks. Okay. Now the next thing is that on the 13th, I'm doing a seminar in that slot, which is also a Wednesday, isn't it?
That's a Thursday.
Is it a Thursday? Oh, hurrah. Okay, good. So I'm doing a seminar, and the seminar is going to be on Frankenstein. It's going to be a form of alchemy where we're going to go through some of the romantic views, but go from Frankenstein to Turing machines to artificial intelligence, you know, I don't know, and then go home and weep.
What time is that, John?
What time is that? It's going to be 5:32, I assume.
I think it's at 3.
Is it?
I think that's what she said last night.
Is that 3? Okay, it might be at 3. See how seriously I'm taking this.
That's in the lecture.
No, none of these are in the lecture theater. Thank you for saying that. They're in this place that's just been built called the Imaginarium, which is in the Bull Ring, which it looks like a wonderful thing. Really great. I'll tell you later. It's an interesting, I think it's great actually. It's a very good idea. And anyway, so that's why there's only 40 spaces in these things. But what I wanted to do was figure out how to have a fun seminar with the PhD students that we would kind of cause a little bit of trouble. So I want you to put your thinking caps on. Is there anybody who wants to be sitting around the table of the seminar on that day? Nobody. Okay, well, that solves that. Seriously? You don't want to be involved? You don't want to be involved? Oh, you do want to be involved. Okay. Grace, can I ask you to be the person where they give you the names, or no?
Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah.
Can you give Grace your names if you want to do this? And then...
What time's that then?
I don't know. I think it's at 3.
I'll find out. I think it's 3.
But you're talking at 3.
No, I'm leading the seminar.
With us.
With everybody, I want us to figure out how to make this.
Oh, it's
I
a
would like
seminar
to
talk.
wear
Right, okay.
an outfit, is my thinking. I really want to go into, like, I think that I could do with being Boris Karloff, you know. I don't know. I just think we have to think it through, or even if we went all formally dressed, tails and bow ties or something. I don't know. I would like to do something that is just quirky enough that we have a little bit of fun.
Ingo's robots.
What's that?
Robots.
Robots.
Well, you did say Frankenstein, but we could update it so we could go as robots.
Cyborgs. Yeah.
Cyborgs,
Yes.
robots. Yeah, hey, I'm into that. Yeah, absolutely. You know.
For lots of
I
things.
think you said Reeboks.
We all are.
I thought you meant that we should go as a sneaker, like a Reebok. I was thinking, okay, that could work, I guess. Okay, so have a think about it.
So whereabouts in the Bull Ring is this Imaginarium?
Apparently, it's very visible. Is it?
I think it's on the lower ground floor.
Okay.
In the lower court, I think.
Have you seen
in
it?
Selfridges.
Is it built yet?
No, it's not built yet.
Oh, okay, right. It's not in Selfridges. It's near Selfridges.
Okay.
I thought it was in
It's
the
in the
It's where the
Oh, is
streets
it in-
are, is that right?
Yeah. I think it's where the candy bull is.
Yeah.
Candy bowl.
Yeah, I think
There's
it's
a
got
bull
liquor
there.
in it.
There's a candy ball.
I think, is it?
The candy bowl.
There's jelly
There's a
beans.
candy
Got it.
bowl.
Yeah.
I love Birmingham. I really do.
There is-
The
there's
candy
really
bowl.
imaginary.
It's not touch the cup, it's lick the bull.
Wow.
There's
That's
jelly beans
good.
been there a long time.
That's right, yeah, and a lot of people probably licked them, so yeah. You know, right, okay, so that's on the 13th. On the 19th of February, I'm doing my professorial inaugural so come to it if you feel like it, but you should because it's going to be, I think, on a Wednesday. Is that a Wednesday?
Yeah, that's a Wednesday.
That's a Wednesday, okay.
Yeah.
So rather than having the PhD seminar, we'll have my inaugural lecture, unless you just want to have a seminar and I won't be there, okay, which is fair enough. No, it's not fair enough. Okay, I don't know where it is.
Is that over at Parks?
Probably it'll be over at Parks. I'd rather here actually, but
Yeah.
you know, where are they going to do it?
They want to show it off, so.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're taking to Pakistan.
That's right.
They
That's
want
right.
to show
Yeah.
it
Stop it.
off.
Stop it. Control yourself. Now on that's the 13th, and that's going to be so the
19th.
no, sorry, the seminar on the 13th is going to be broadcast on radio, but I don't know which radio station.
It's Butcher's Apron. So
It's what?
It's called the Butcher's Apron.
God, I
They're,
love this place. It's fantastic. The Bull's Candy and the Butcher's Apron. Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay.
Oh, yeah, selfridges.
That's right. Okay, so that's a radio program? Is it
Yeah.
is it a pirate program or something? Or
I don't actually know much about it, but it's two women that host it, and I think they've set it up and they work with suffrages.
oh, okay, right. Okay, that's it. Okay, great. Where I have one more. Oh yeah, and on the 20th, I think it is, or maybe it's the following week. There's one more major being, and that's Christina Anderson coming to speak. You don't have memorized the date, no. And Christina Anderson, I'd also like her to come here to speak. She is amazing. She's the deputy director of STIME, which is Studio for Electronic Instrumental Music, and she's an artist. She does very unusual sculptures. And recently in the last, let's say, two or 3 years, she's been working on the notion of magical thinking. And by magical thinking is an actual term that is often applied to children or even adults that are thinking, they're basically suspending belief, or they're believing in the disbelief. And so they make connections that have a logic to them that are simply founded in a kind of magic realism. And it's a very, anyway, and that moved her into different questions around magic and so on. And her work, if you look her up, Christina with a K, Kristina, Anderson with an E, Andersen, you'll see what her work's about. And and it's also coupled with a lot of music. Well, not the sculptures. STIME is an acoustic environment, so she's involved in that level. Okay, I think that's all the dates I can remember at the moment for February. Okay, any questions on this, and then we can begin. I'm sorry, it took a little bit longer than I thought. Let's begin. Okay. Last week we discussed how we could go forward with the seminar, and I thought about it. I've chewed on it. I'm wondering if you thought and chewed on it. We came up with basically two parallel structures. There was like a bit of a one side one and one side one the other. Sort of strength on both sides for two different ways of approaching a similar problem. So we were calling the seminar Alchemy, and that gives us a wide palette. And I asked people to look at the periodic table, which that little ditty that you sent was hilarious. You should send it around to the group. Yeah. There's another one that I'll send around as well. It's a thing on quantum physics. That this guy has come up with a fantastic song, basically, but that doesn't even do it justice. Anyway, so while we're in this kind of music fest of how to learn these things, so I asked people to look at the elements. I of course asked you to look at Breaking Bad. I'm sure no one did this. Did you? What did you think?
It was great.
Did you see the whole thing?
No.
No. Oh.
But it was hard work.
Yes, it's hard work. Well, it is watching a Shakespearean drama. Well, it is. It's called Breaking Bad.
Oh, the whole series?
The whole series.
Yeah, web series.
Isn't it fantastic?
Yes.
I finally could not do anything. I had to just finish watching it. I just gave up. That was it. So I finished it on Sunday.
I liked it. It's got that addictive element.
It sure does. Yeah, I've never had that in a television. I've had it with books I've read, but I've never had it with watching it something on television. So I found that interesting. Anyway, that's just me. But one of the reasons I wanted people to watch it, apart from the fact that you can see how insane your supervisor is, was to look at how they're playing around with the elements, the chemistry elements, because every opening shot is a way in which they recombine the periodic table. So that's why I wanted you to take a look at it. Okay, the other thing that we thought about, one sort of element of people wanted to think about concepts, things driven by concepts. So like last semester we did groundless grounds, and we located it in the book, but it was basically where we're situated. So I thought long and hard about it, and it sounded to me that on the one hand we're going to look at some classics. We're going to look at the critique of pure reason, and Leibniz's various aspects of Leibniz's work, probably some Spinoza, in order to really start thinking about one to three different concepts that have sub-concepts to them. One concept is the concept called metaphysics, which I think is about time we just know what that is in a real sense, not just in a sort of potted history sense. In the concept of metaphysics, transcendental and transcendent, and therefore ways in which this notion of spirit comes to play. By spirit, it could mean a religious thing, it could mean a supernatural thing, it could mean a lot of things, it could be mysticism. That can lend us into, what do you call it, speculative realism. So metaphysics is kind of like the first question mark, and within that, maybe that's not the second one, but within it is this question of transcendental, transcendence, this notion of movement within the sensuous logics. This is why Kant is important. And then I thought that it would make sense, so that would be the first few weeks. And then I thought, and we'd be looking at critique of pure reason as a grounding feature. We'd be looking at different features of Leibniz. I'm not sure which one yet. I know that we put some down, but I'm not 100% convinced on the ones we chose. There's also the work of Spinoza on it's on theology, but it's that's mainly not because I'm trying to do a God lecture here, but I would like you to get a sense of the way in which the other, in this sort of lofty, out there, can't be seen, talks to you sort of way works, and I think that falls into your work. It's one thing, but I mean, there's a number of people right now that are working on things about supernatural, interestingly enough, and magic and this kind of thing. So I thought, okay, so we're going to try and think about this notion of how things move. That'll get us into this question of transformation. And transformation now is going to be what is really meant by a transformation. Do we mean a chemical process? Maybe we mean a chemical. Do we mean, like, you know, for me, the only thing I like about cooking is I like it when it changes. Like, I love making scrambled eggs because you can just see the egg go from liquid to solid. I love that. I think that's fantastic. Every time I make scrambled eggs, I think about that. And I make the best scrambled eggs ever. If we ever had like a day away or something like that, I'd make you guys scrambled eggs because I feel like they're the best. Yeah. Enter. Oh, my computer. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Ready?
Oh, thank you.
I'm taking the account.
Sorry. Thanks. That's fluent. Sorry, one moment. Okay, thanks. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your work on that. All right, back. So the second sort of section of what we'll be getting into is this question of transmutation, transubstantiation, all these ways in which the body, liquids, dirtiness, this kind of thing is all part of how things change, corrosiveness. We'll go into that section. And I think that that's answering the kind of things that you were putting on the table last week. I'm not 100% certain, but I'm thinking it does. So this way in which elements, what's the difference between an element, a set, an ingredient, a particular a particularity, you know, a full concept. It will move in and out of these things. Eventually, I hope we end up on, my attempt is to, without pushing it in a direction that it can't go, we end up on poetics. And we end up on Heideggerian poetics is really what I'm talking about here. And by that I mean we start thinking about how this may or may not solidify or not solidify into these other platforms, let's say the event or the dwelling or the way in which one obliterates object and subject. Because in the first two sections, really it's going to be about what is an object, you know, and or what is a subject, or both. And then we're going to play around with that. We're going to start shifting on that. Does that sound like you're interested in that?
Yeah, sounds good.
Sounds okay. Yeah? Because I don't want, did you want more mathematics?
We can always bring more mathematics. We always end up getting into quantum physics. So I'm
Okay,
always
well, let's,
disappointed that we never
okay, all right, so
take
let's
that
do
in.
that then. Let's say that the event will be, will have, before we go to Heidegger, we'll go to Einstein and Bohr. And we'll go through those debates, because we'll be able, I hope, and that will mean looking at the, we'll have to look at the second, third laws of thermodynamics, you know, so you get a sense of what it means to talk about temperature. Temperature is a great thing, like I said, making scrambled eggs.
Yeah,
Very
I think
important. Temperature's good, isn't it, huh?
If we'll be talking about transformation, in
That's
chemical,
temperature,
you have,
yeah.
I forgot the word, but you have philosopher's stone that transmutes something into
Yeah,
another thing.
yeah.
So that would be, you know, that would be if we put
Okay, we could do, yeah, we could do that there, yeah.
I think we can fit.
Because then we could then move into light bundles, and the quanta as a bundle, because that's what a quanta is a bundle of light, light energy. In case you didn't know that, everybody, now you know, quanta is a bundle of light energy. That's what quanta is. Ta-da. Okay, we'll get by that. And that can move us into, let's say, Chaitin's work. He's a good grounding, relaxing read.
It's really annoying with his metabiology.
I know. Sorry.
His metaphysics wasn't bad.
That's right. That's right.
How'd you spell that?
Chaitin, Chaitin. Gregory Chaitin. Basically, anything he writes is great. Oh, are people having problems accessing Dropbox?
Yes.
Okay, so I think what I'm going to do is just put everything that's on Dropbox on Google+. Because Google+ is infinite, and you don't have to buy anything extra. So they get you on the Dropbox thing.
Can I get an invite to?
What's that?
Can I get an invite to?
Yeah, of course. Can you send me an email to remind me to get you an invite, because otherwise I won't
Can I do the same, Johnny, as well?
I thought I sent you one.
I have, but I don't know why. I don't know whether it's because I changed my name after
Okay.
the fact, and it seems to be causing problems.
Okay.
I'm logging in my old name, which it'll let me, but then it will say that it doesn't recognise it when I do my new name.
Okay, I'll remind you.
taken,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it's
yeah.
all-
Just send me an
I don't know whether I
email.
have to change my email, but I will email you.
So just send me an email.
Yeah.
And then, are people able to, at the moment, manage with Dropbox?
Some of it is just black text on a black background, and some of it is yellow text on a white background.
Really?
That not had a problem.
Maybe it's my laptop.
Just check the settings.
Yeah, what type of
I'll
laptop?
try downloading the file, because I
Yeah,
realized
that's
it
true.
doesn't open online. My files are not always open online, the file, but when I download it and then I open through
Yeah.
Adobe Reader, it actually opens normally, so maybe it's easier that way.
Okay.
You can also install Dropbox so that it is a folder on your desktop, and you don't have to go to the website, which is much slower. And then just have the PDF there. Just don't drag it, copy it, because if you drag it, you remove it from the website.
Okay.
Okay, so the core text in section 1, as it were, is going to be basically Kant and Leibniz. And we're always going to be doing a double helix move in the class. So we have Kant, but then we have Leibniz, and Leibniz is not Kant. They're going to come in from very different, as you already know from looking at it, very different ways in. that will allow us to do some kind of move into Spinoza, but I'm not sure if we will directly go into Spinoza because it's not, I'm not sure how the seminar will go. Then in the section, so that's going to be the what is metaphysics, what is, you know, how does one understand this question of time, temporality, and so on and so forth. I think that then this transformation section and the, like Lauren was saying, temperature, and different kinds of reactions, we could actually get into entanglements and quantum, but I think we need a little bit more under our belt. What was the, I forgot now, what was the middle section? It was going to be on all
transformation, transmutation, change.
There's a very good piece that one should take a look at some point. It's written a while ago, but I think it's still relevant. It's called the sexuality of Christ, and it's by Leo Bersani, Bersani, and I think it's not difficult, Dane, to get a PDF of it. You've been doing a great job putting all these PDFs on. My God, every time I turn it on, it's like 22 minutes ago. Dane has uploaded. In fact, today I was uploading the Critique of Pure Reason, and it was already there. I was like, wow. Great. So thank you.
What was his name again, sorry?
Leo, L-E-O,
yeah.
Bersani, B-E-R-S-A-N-I. There's a book-length version of it. It first came out in October, in the journal called October. I think in 1996, but it is fantastic because what he does is he analyzes 15th century lithographs and other, you know, wood cuts and, you know, whatever, different paintings, and what he calls the chin chuck and the grabbing of the testicles. Because you'll see that every picture of Christ, particularly as a child, obviously, not as an adult, you have mainly either priest or elderly women fondling his testicles. And there's this whole, he makes this whole analysis about what this is to check on the sexuality or the gender or the position. And it's really an interesting piece. So just take a look at it. It'll be part of this whole transmortification, transmogrifying. How do you say that?
Transmogrification.
Yes, transmogrification. So I'm thinking that that'll be useful for a number of your researches because of the way in which you're thinking about, in your case, layering, because there's a process involved. So maybe that's what we should call that second section, the section of process. So the first one is metaphysics. The second one's going to be process, and under metaphysics will be this relation between transcendence and transcendental, and we'll get into questions of the spirit and so on and so forth. And we'll move into monadology with Leibniz. And then the second one will be on processes, and with the processes, I think that we can either do different like chains of equivalence. Have you ever heard of this before in terms of research, chains of equivalence? Okay, this is because I've outlawed semiotics in the class, so I'm sorry about that. But chains of equivalence are things like, I've used this before in the group, but if you say things like train, you know, overweight man with shaved head and swastika on face, and flags, and a bunch of people looking just like that, drunk and screaming, what am I describing? What?
Football match.
Yeah, football match, a football code against. Now, there's no real reason that you would think this, but it's because of a cultural chain of equivalences that you're able to make that jump, make that into that, oh yeah, that's what that is. And as an artist, you then learn how to play with these chains by taking one of the pieces out and putting in, let's say, the number 5. Or you can do it the other way around. Let's say you have a system 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the next part is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And so every time you hit a 5, you hit the 5th thing, you put in a tree, something like that. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, tree, 6, 7, 8, 9, tree, and you learn how to build the process of the logic. That's like a very basic way of talking about it, and that's an algorithmic thing. So in these processes, we can move from sort of simple chains of equivalences to metamorphosis to morphogenesis and fractals and algorithms and all the different types of equations, and that would get us into quantum physics. And then we'll move into the event. How's that? Does that sound okay? Am I answering what you wanted, or is that not what you wanted to do?
No, well, the first part's good enough.
Okay. Is there anything else that you would like to see in this term? Okay, somebody mentioned the tie, but are we still in the tie phase? We are in the tie. Okay, so the tie would have to come after Kant and before process. Could come in between that. How's that? I think inner experience, probably a blue noon, probably good to read. Things you haven't read before. Tears of Arrows, always a good one. Story of the Eye, along with Story of O. Quite good. Okay, so let's begin. Are we okay with this? Does that sound okay? Is there anything you might want to see on here?
Not yet.
Not yet. What about you?
Algorithms are fine with me, and the metaphysics transcendentalism.
Okay. Let's do it.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah, Lauren?
Yes.
Thompson? Yeah. Sophie?
Are we taking fractals with algorithms or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Mark, did you want to add anything? No? Okay. Everybody okay? Easy. Okay, let's begin. The book that you also need to look at with Kant is called God, it's not on my head. Prolegomena, you always get mad at me at that. Prolegomena to the critique, to the foundations of metaphysics. This is a very thin volume. It's about 90 pages long or something like that. And I'll be interested to see it. We'll look at that next week alongside the critique of pure reason. How many people got a chance to look at least the first sections of the critique of pure reason? No one took a look at it?
Because we're reading Leibniz.
Just did Leibniz. Okay, that's fine. Let's do Leibniz. Let me do a little short thing on Kant then, and then we'll move into Leibniz. Okay. What I'd like you to, it's going to be very short, so I'll just put markers out here. Kant makes an incredible shift in an argument that's been going on for a long time with this question called metaphysics. And the question concerning metaphysics is still a question that is concerning today. Metaphysics, there's a debate, certainly by amongst postmodernists, that metaphysics, one should get over it, should get out of it, you know. So we're going to just park that so that we can just talk about what at least Kant, Hegel, this crowd, but mainly Kant, is dealing with this question of metaphysics. He's making an argument that in order to investigate the phenomena, the reality of what is, there has to be, there's two major things he takes as a kind of given, which he calls an a priori, so before, a priori synthetic unity. Or let's just call it a priori for the time being, just as a marker here. And that is the will. And he basically says that the will is the basis of where you start. You know how Hegel starts with the now? Kant starts with the will. And he basically says this will is the secret ingredient for all artists. In fact, he'll go further and say it's the secret ingredient for anyone. Someone's on their deathbed and they don't die, will. There's no explanation, this kind of thing. This is the will I'm talking about, or this is the will that Kant's going to start arguing about. And he's saying that that exists prior to knowledge, the will. So it's got an a priori existence. And more importantly, you can't divide off the will from knowledge. So Antonio Gramsci develops this argument with a statement that goes, hello, that's not how the statement goes. The statement goes, pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. And it was a rallying cry. Come in. It was a rallying cry for leftists, really, but almost anybody who, when you look around, you see how crappy things are. but then the will is what keeps you going. People like Bergson take on the notion of the will that Kant develops. Bergson, Deleuze, Lyotard up to a certain extent. They take this notion and they say this vitality that you can't quite put your finger on is the fundamental sort of position. It's the thing that gets you going, is this will. And Bergson later calls this vitalism. And this notion of the will, and particularly the question of free will, as opposed to, I don't know, rented will or mortgage will. Let's see where I'm going. This question of free will becomes the critical position, or one of the critical positions in Kant. And he's arguing that through a long series of arguments, he's going to make a position around this thing called the radical autonomy of the individual. And he calls it the radical autonomy of the individual. And what is radical about what's radical about an individual being autonomous is A, that there's like an arm's length distance between being an individual and carrying out the will of the state. Now, this is when you read the Prolegomena, whatever it's called, I'm going to say Prolegomena because that's what I've always said, and I know it's wrong. I can't help it. Prolegomena. Okay. It's annoying that you're sitting here. Anyway, in this position became a fundamental position for John Locke, for Rousseau, for a lot of the, John Locke was early, but a lot of the arguments around the will of the people, the general and particular will, the way in which democracy features, this is coming out of a Kantian move. And that there is a thing called an individual, and B, this individual, in order to actually fulfill themselves as being an individual, has to have as a primary condition of being human an unfettered access to the will. But at the same time, one kind of already has an unfettered access to the will because the will is indomitable. There's an old expression, break a horse once, you have a great horse, break a horse twice, you've killed it. So you can, because in the same thing that Kant would say about humans, you can shape the will, but if you break the will, you've broken the person. So there's something about this will that we've never talked about in this class that is important for you to get a sense that this is part of the glue, part of the kind of material. It's a materiality to Kant, and it's an a priori synthetic unity that he's going to start off his argument with. The other thing you need to think about is the way in which he's going to start developing this question of time in relation to will. Unlike a lot of arguments which say, if you can't watch, if it's not there, then it didn't happen. If you're not there, then it didn't happen. If the tree fell in the forest and you didn't hear it, did it really fall? My answer has always been yes, it did. It's like too bad you weren't there to witness it, but it's not a big question. But a lot of philosophers, a lot of artists, a lot of everybody have very complicated arguments into this question, and Kant is one of those people that does not have a complicated argument. He says you don't have to be present to know that the will exists. So just park those two things, the will and the question of time, as a feature of knowledge. This is part of his move that he's going to make in the Critique of Pure Reason. So he's going to have this question of the will and this question of time. All right, now we'll park that. Did anybody have any questions on that? I just felt you need to have that before we launch into Leibniz. We'll circle back to this in a bigger way, next week. Okay, Mattia, you were going to make the first volley of Leibniz.
Okay. I've been reading Leibniz in the past 2 months, concentrating on a specific part of it, so I hope it is not a general overview.
Well, maybe if, can anybody or, because I can do it if you need to, but does anybody want to make a stab at some of the more critical concepts in Leibniz that we're going to keep playing around with? Name like three. The main one.
Ideas,
Okay.
God, and order or justice.
Okay, okay, there's one more then. So it's an M.
Monads.
Monads, yes. I would say, and monads, one could argue is a palimpsest. So make that in your brain somehow. Okay, now go on. So ideas.
Monads, idea, order, and God, which goes around the graphs anyway. Probably one should start by placing it historically. Leibniz lived in the second half of the 17th century and died in the very early 18th century, in 1760. He was just a bit older than Locke. And in the 17th century, the problem philosophy was trying to figure out is, following Descartes, is how are we certain of the knowledge we are getting? And this was opening up, let's say, the conceptual space that then permits founding science.
Can you say that again?
How is it possible? What guarantees us that the knowledge we get through perception, the senses are giving us, it is a certain knowledge, it's not just imagination, or illusion, or dream. And by developing all the facets of this problem, they were effectively opening up the space for modern science that then starts happening in the mid-18th century and then gives rise to the Industrial Revolution. So it's the moment of onset of modernity after a century and a half of Renaissance that separates the paradigm from the Middle Ages. There is this new approach to reality, as is something that is obviously created by God, because it's still there, but becomes subject to rules that, especially in Leibniz, even God has to follow. Or better, God has created those rules and they cannot disobey them once they are there.
Can I just parentheses, because I think people, if you don't mind, people will jump in. But that's a difference between understanding what is real and what is true. So, or to put it, no, put it slightly differently, what is real and what is ethically correct. So the fact that it's real doesn't mean that ethics comes into this yet. It's just the question of whether or not you can say that what lies before you not as a dream, but in its real state, whatever that state is, including in your mind. Like if you have something in your head, it doesn't have to literally be sitting in front of you to be real. And if it's real, in that sense, it's true. But it doesn't mean it's ethically true. It's just true. Okay? It's important that you make, I know this sounds like picky, but you have to, one has to recognize what's going to happen, because we're going to go on a really fast ride on understanding how this thing that's real, which is in your head, it's not just something that you're just, just thinking about, whatever, that it's real. And that the question is, how do you prove that, right? How do you prove the supernatural? Like, let's say people really, the guy, whatever his name was in Canada, Hamilton, no, was it? Yeah, Hamilton. And he really, let's say he really believed it. Whether or not he, and so he went to extraordinary lengths to prove something. He went to falsification lengths to prove something, but he did think it was real. Ask yourself the question, how would Leibniz categorize that? What's the difference between that being, actually real, really real, or just your idea real? So that you're perceiving something, what makes it real? And that's what he was trying to show. And the answer to that question, unlike the answer for Hegel, which was a whole series of moves that created a sort of a sealed logic, with Leibniz, he doesn't need to go in that direction because he's starting with perception. And that's a very odd start. Now we can continue. Sorry. I will just be like and then there's, go ahead.
And this problem was addressed.
What's Leibniz's first name,
Gottfried.
Thank you.
Wilhelm.
Just
Wilhelm.
Yes.
Sorry, Drew, can I just ask, has that got anything to do with ontology, ontological argument, this idea of debate, something exists, believe that
Can everybody hear this in the back? Yeah. Sorry, Dan. Yeah.
The ontological argument, what you're referring to, that if you believe it exists, it's valid. I can't explain it, but
And when you say ontological argument, what do you mean?
ontologies is this
Or how are you using it?
the understanding of metaphysics.
No. The ontology is a ground. It's the logic of the onto, or the optic. And so, ology, always remember that ology is logic of whatever it's attached to. So, logical ontology of the ontic. So, you're right, because what you're not really, I mean, to make the statement as opposed to ask the question, you know, this seems to be about something to do with ontology. Yes, in the sense that it's going to ground the argument. It's going to give you a way into the argument. Because once you have a way into the argument, you can build it. Once you put that thing on the canvas, or once you start, you can begin to build. That's your ontology, that's your ontic. Okay, so in that sense, he's starting with that, and he's saying that dot, that splash, that's real. Then it gets complicated.
Yes. So this approach divided itself into roughly two fields. One very British, which was the empiricist, John Locke as well, where the idea was that the mind would be a tabula rasa, with a blank slate, and this was borrowed from Aristotle, and that the knowledge would etch itself through experience onto it. The other one was a more rationalist move, which assumed they were called innate ideas, that humans had some innate ideas in their mind, which permitted them to organize experience. And mostly those that always recurred were, one was the idea of God, the other one was the principle of causation, space and time, some basic epistemological structures.
So just stop just a second so that people can really hear this. I didn't
Blanks,
realize I didn't realize you were going to give
the
lecture on
original step
philosophy. That's great. That's brilliant.
So there's blank slate on one side, completely malleable, but with nothing on it. And it's something that has already a first layer of software. There is an imprint, there is a paradigm already etched onto the mind. That would be the rationalist innate ideas.
So empiricism, kind of versus, but not completely versus, because empiricism and rationalism kind of go on the same side in some ways. They certainly go on the same side if we get to discourse theory. But in this moment of the discussion, they're kind of on different sides. You might want to say in the contemporary moment, bizarrely enough, Mao Zedong, was closer to a Lockean position. He argued that everybody is a blank slate, that that one starts like born again, as it were. In fact, the born again crowd is part of this. This is where you are able to erase everything and begin again in this very constructed way. Now, Locke had his most important book on this position is called the two treatises of. It's called Two Treatises. Maybe it's just called the Two Treatises. No, there's more to it. But Two Treatises is in the title. I can't think of it at the moment. Where he develops this argument, and it is taken to task by many philosophers and some political theorists. But mainly what happens with the political theory crowd, they like the Lockean position because it allows for a very specific kind of political action. Whereas the rationalist position tends to get one into sort of a softer social agency position. And that's also interesting. So now, and can you name the people that are in rationalism?
Oh, no, not much. Well, Mark can also help us. He's more systematic in his knowledge than I am. Descartes is rational. Leibniz is rational. Spinoza was is rational, but they
Well,
sort of
they
merge,
did.
they
Spinoza
merge.
had odd issues, yeah.
They merge because I would put another division on the table, or another two other vectors. One is essentialism, that basically was a position that assumed that it would be essences. In other words, one could strip something of all of its material qualities and yet retain its identity. And instead, the opposite position was that if you strip all the qualities of something, then you do not have an identity anymore. So you cannot count one versus
And
versus
which was
another.
which? Well, before you say it, what do you think? What do people think? Which one's which? Repeat the possibilities
The
again.
possibilities is that essences exist, that whatever, either a person or
So there's a
concept
treeness
or
to tree.
There is a treeness to tree, and actually not only a treeness to tree, but there is a specific treeness to a specific tree, which allows differentiating that tree, although everything of its empirical quality has been taken away from another tree. You know, or
And who would make that argument? Which side do you think makes that
That's the
argument?
logical side or the rational side.
The rational side.
interestingly enough, Leibniz, who's on the rationalist side, rejects these. So the two arguments constantly flow into each other, the two positions. Indeed, the point of Leibniz is that you have to have qualities in two otherwise undefined entities. If A and B are all in all equal, and the only thing that distinguishes them is that there's one is here and one is there, they are not. They have to. There is no difference. There must be a quality that differentiates the two. Otherwise, they are the same thing. There is no way to logically distinguish A and B if their essence is exactly the same but is different. No, there's a contradiction. It's just
Does that make sense? Did everybody follow that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, I'm just saying very well.
Yeah. Can you
Voice of people.
can you repeat that a little bit?
I will repeat it my own way. Right?
Yeah, that's good.
They need to be. If A was equal B, then and they had no all elements would be equal. They would be one.
Exactly.
And Leibniz
They'd
makes
be
an
the same.
argue that they are not the same because they occupy, let's say, even different places in space, or any difference between them give them their own essence and makes them separate, right?
Yes. He calls it principle of the indiscernibles.
In the what?
Indiscernibles.
Indiscernibles.
Which goes
And
as
where does he
in the
say
what?
that?
that is in the Odyssey. I mean, Leibniz published one book in his life, and
he didn't have to deal with the rap.
and wrote endless letters and started plenty of projects but never finished.
So feel good. Feel good.
But he held extensive correspondence with all the other scientists. and
So
philosophers.
feel bad. Feel bad. Okay.
So that one has to read anthologies or very well planned studies of his work to find everything one seems wrong. But the principle on the solar is precisely that for two things to be exactly the same but different is a contradiction. It's a logical contradiction. So it does not permit its existence because you cannot think of it. Obviously, there is an element of.
So would he ever, from this argument, I'm trying to get everybody on the same page here. So if A equals B, if you can say A equals B, mathematically, let's say, Leibniz would say no, it can only be A equals A.
Yes.
Right now, are you following how insane this is at the moment? Why could A never equal B? Let's just rehearse Leibniz's argument again, and then we're going to go to the empiricists to find out why they can. But why can A never equal B?
Because it's universal. You take into consideration everything. If you assume that A is the same that B in quantity, it could be, or you need a third element.
And what's that element that Mattia stroke Leibniz mentioned?
Time.
No.
God.
No.
Ace.
No.
The
No.
essence. The essence.
Yes, quality.
Yeah.
It's the quality, the quality, essence, yes. Oh, we needed to play hangman, that would have been so much more fun. Okay, I'll get my chart out in a mo. Okay, go on. But why is it that the empiricist, or how is it that the empiricists can argue that A equals B? And why is it so annoying for both of them, so much so that they hate each other, like two houses in a Shakespearean play, Romeo and Juliet, empiricists and rationalists at that stage of the game? Why do they hate why do they have difficulties with each other? What is it about the empiricist move that's annoying Leibniz?
I'm not as able to explain
Oh,
it.
sorry. I'm not trying to.
No. The problem is, where is the quality of an object laying? The example that they all discussed upon is, it is very easy to say that this is hard, because it is almost self-evident. And when I touch with my finger the flame of the candle, and I feel burning, is burning the quality, the heat? Is it quality of the flame, or is it my finger, the sensation? And it's a problem that obviously changes radically what you can do with that bit of knowledge. Because if it is my finger, then I could augment as well energy and perpetuous motor. So it would be, it opens up a completely different kind of epistemological settings. If burning is a quality of the flame, then you can break it down. Well, then I feel the finger, but it's something else. The heat belongs to the flame, it's not to the finger. Then it's a different kind of structure that probably these opens up.
There was no television at that time. Okay, they could think about these things.
And the two also have the two sides. I'm trying to reconstruct from information that got in my mind. But
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there. So
no, it's fine. It was also depending on the position they assumed, but the importance and the role they gave to God in the way they understood nature. Because the rationalist position still gave God an incredible amount of responsibility in the way we move and understand nature. The empiricist position tried to do without, not because they gave less importance to God at the time, but because they thought there was no need for it. And upon that, as you were saying, political issues were stemming from.
So with all the defects of the empiricists, the one thing that they have going for them, in a certain sense, is that they are secular, really, at the end of the day. They are pushing the agenda, the Kantian side of the agenda that pushes the radical autonomy of the individual, and that pushes that whole thing that we were talking about before, sapere aude, dare to know, figure out the exit. It's a different kind of relationship to the autonomy of to having an autonomy or a semi-autonomy, or what they call a radical autonomy of the state, of the individual. And then on the other hand, the rationalists are able to begin the argument that later becomes chains of equivalences, where you start realizing, well, if I can do this, the finger thing is a good one. So if you have the flame, and the flame, and is it coming out of your flame or is it coming out of your finger? Well, an alchemist would say, let's get it on the finger. Let's see if we can make it jump and not have it only in the thing. That could be connected with the rationalist approach, which still invests itself in the question of spirit. There's another layer that's going on in the story.
If one wants, it can be approached as an open or closed approach to things. When I find something, do I invest it with cultural layering that I already carry with me, or I try to shed it all and be impressed by it as purely as possible? The empiricists think or aim at a completely unprejudiced form of experience at the beginning, in order to avoid pre-existing ideologies. The audience that take pre-existing ideologies as absolutely necessary for organizing reality. But then the two constantly void each other because also the empiricists cannot do without some sort of basis in the
Just as an aside, there's a book by Stephen Lukes called Relativism and Rationality. I think it was written in the 90s, maybe. I'm not sure if he passed away actually, but he was a fellow at Oxford. He's an interesting guy. He was involved in the power debates, which were very big debates in the 60s and 70s. With Stephen Lukes and who was the guy? I can't his name anyway. And the second book that you should know about as the sort of background to this kind of empiricism, rationalism, is a book by Sheldon Wolin, W-O-L-I-N, called Politics and Vision. And it starts setting up how these debates started to unfold. I mean, this is only if you're interested in going in this direction, but it's not uninteresting. Go on.
Okay, then and more specific to Leibniz, there are several arguments through his work. The one I've been looking at, which I think is a good sort of vector that keeps it together, is the infinite divisibility of matter.
Did you hear that? The infinite divisibility of matter.
You might have, we've come across her in various seminars earlier about the Zenon paradoxes of Achille and the Tartars, Parmenides versus Heraclitus. It's the word with the head. So pure being, solid and static, or it is becoming. If it is becoming, it is constantly flowing. You can have a quantitative, you can divide it infinitely. Achille will never overtake the Tartar in the famous race. You can never path twice in the same river because it flows. This problem of time flowing and the possibility of having the whole picture solid in front of this issue of wholeness and of atoms at the base as basic elements is why sort of freedom values was big. Was, for example, supported by Descartes, who did see whole entities as the base layer of matter of the world. Literally atoms, as we conceive atoms now. The problem is that now we know that there are subatomic particles. Otherwise, atom is a Greek word that means a terminal. It cannot be divided any further. The A has been negative, so it cannot be cut any further. Leibniz rejects this. Says no, matter is infinitely divisible. So he did work a lot on mathematics as well. He developed calculus in parallel with Newton. Then they fought about this, but in the possibility of representing pictures, we spoke about this a bit before Christmas. In representing geometrical figures mathematically, one can have one part of the figure, whether it is an angle or a side, equal to 0, which is something one cannot draw. But also one can have a part of the figure as 0.1111111. So the infinitesimal becomes the fundamental problem for the representation of nature mathematically, because one can never reach a whole definition of something. There is always an approximation, never a definition. So the issue of unity at the point of infinity becomes a very, very important problem that comes up with Leibniz, is rejected by the essentialists, for example, and then that kind of picks up again and builds a system of law.
So to stop right there, because I want to make sure that people hear that. Do you mind grabbing that, that little board there, that little whiteboard? I want, if you don't mind, drawing the graph, the Leibniz, the various graphs that we were looking at before. But no, the graph where everything approaches 0. I'll show you.
The one we looked at last week?
Yeah.
Okay,
don't worry about it, I can't find the graph. You just put it here, just so the whiteboard is there. So, can you just throw that pen? Yeah. Thanks. Drop your pens. Yeah. No. You had a whole series of graphs.
No, I'm hiding. I'm invisible.
You need a sample then.
What?
Okay.
Because you need accountant. And I'm like, no, I don't need accountant, although I could use it because my bills are not made. So that's okay. I will postpone that as long as I can.
Okay. Okay. There's a cloth right at the very end. Okay. Never mind, Bruce. Never mind. Okay. So just so you can see it in a way that might hopefully continue to make sense. So you have. This is the graph. I mean, this is just a very simple one. So mathematically, you can get a situation where this is 0, where you can get to 0, but where you can approach 0, but it's divided and divided and divided infinitely, so it never ever reaches 0. Now, what's the point of that, apart from just thinking that Sisyphus and all is lost, and you'll never get there in the end, and your PhD will never be done.
There is the concept that comes out of this is incompleteness. It's impossible to close a circle.
I'm hiding.
That's right.
That's a good word.
Okay.
Be closer.
That's right.
So it's impossible to define a totality, to define an identity.
So in other words, Leibniz becomes, in a very odd way, the bearer of a profoundly secular approach to the world. Despite the fact that, in fact, the way he starts out is profoundly locating this in, let's say, God stroke spirit.
Also because, maybe I'm jumping forward too much, but thanks to this notion of infinite divisibility, he's saying...
And what is the notion of infinity divisibility? Do you say indivisibility?
Infinite divisibility.
Divisibility, right.
He is saying that change does not happen by steps, but continuously one assumes and loses parts of one whole identity. This will become with Deleuze the infinite imperceptible becoming. So much that Leibniz says even life and death are not such clear demarcations, because one form of assemblage might stop being because it has lost too many parts, but it does not mean that there aren't smaller parts of it that are still alive, all the organic part. He was very in touch with a Dutch biologist, biologist was an optician who had invented lenses that became the first microscope, and was looking at the water in the ditches around his house and discovered that what seemed clear water was steaming with moving things. So this gave Leibniz the idea that...
Gave Leibniz
the idea of the fact that even below the threshold of perception, there are still parts, there are still perceptions that are imperceptible. So the imperceptible becomes so that he brings an example which is quite interesting because it simply jumps to the present with the idea of emergence and complex systems. To me, is very interesting. That he says when we hear the roar of the sea, it's made of hundreds of thousands of waves. We wouldn't be able to hear one wave, but obviously if the wave sound would be 0, it would never amount to anything even if it's sampled 3 million times, because 3 million zeros is still 0. So there must be something that is below the threshold of perception. Is such a degree of division or subdivision that doesn't make yet sense for us. But when it reaches a critical mass, it jumps over the threshold and it becomes something. So there is the continuity, a continuum, which is what he calls it, from macroscopic to microscopic. However, he calls it labyrinth, or labyrinth in Latin of the continuum, because although it is a straight line, it can be divided so many times that you never get to the end of it. So this is the idea of totality that is never closed.
And then would you say then that the empiricists don't use perception?
The empiricists do use perception, but they reject the idea of something thinkable beyond perception.
Right. So that's why.
So there is a threshold or a barrier of perception, and the empiricists stay solidly on one side, and Leibniz wanders off on the other side.
But that's why empiricism becomes the basis of a certain kind of science, which later on is called scientism, which is the thing that a lot of people recoil from, a lot of people in this room, and think that that is in fact science. So just so we're on the same page here. Go ahead.
Now, all these though, it's matter, it's material. And Leibniz clearly in various passages rejects, as I said, the idea of atoms, or as a smaller element that is here and would be the smallest possible, the unit, the basic unit of the world, no matter how many of them there are. I said that you never reach is an asymptotic approach to that. You can always subdivide. However, we are still talking about matter, something that is central. He makes a jump to what he calls substances, things that are able of movement by themselves. That's the closest thing to the definition he gives of substances, that are beyond these, and this is where it becomes a bit of a mystical leap. And those are monads, units, and they are, from this point of view, indivisible. They are beyond that. And they belong to metaphysics.
Repeat that part again.
Beyond the infinite divisibility of matter, which is asymptotic, Leibniz poses something that seems to contradict his belief that there are no basic units. It posits units that are beyond these divisibilities and are substances. They are not material. They will end up constituting souls, but they are not as immediately soul as in the soul of a person, because it sees substances as in animals or even slower or smaller forms of self-movement or self-activity. And they are past the material, they're past essential. It is no longer the threshold of perception, it's just an entirely different set.
I think I need to just clarify one aspect, because I want to make sure. Just be careful. Oh, I didn't see this plane. I thought you were drawing. Oh, never mind. Okay. So when one is thinking about this, the perception of something, this perception, let's say, is a field. Now, one has to be careful about what's, quote, beyond the field, because the notion of the beyond and beyond the field is still, at some aspects of Leibniz's work, in the field. It's the field of knowledge. Okay, so perception isn't outside of knowledge, or knowledge isn't above perception, or something like that. It's still, in a certain sense, it prefigures the Hegelian move that has knowledge as the base and also as the highest form. So just be careful when you're thinking about monadology, and this question of how there can be something existing outside of the perceptible grasp, that something is not, the word outside is a very clumsy thing for Leibniz, because it's not really it's not outside of knowledge, it's in a sensuous realm of knowledge. So knowledge, let's say, this sort of more empirical sense of knowledge is located closer to perception, and the more sensuous, the wider form of knowledge includes the monadology. So that's where you have to be careful, because yes, he immediately develops it into a soul issue, S-O-U-L. And in fact, Grace could have an entire chapter in your thesis on monads with respect to supernatural, because it's the same. It could be developed. You'll see the parallels when you start really looking at Leibniz, how that actually operates. But it's not that there's a separate thinking of how this operates. Are you going to find it? Because I mean, at the very beginning of the work I pulled up on monadology, the very first position that he states on page 1 is, quote, my topic here, now he's talking about what is philosophy, my topic here will be the monad, which is just a simple substance. By calling it, quote, simple, I mean that it has no parts, though it can be part of something composite. You see that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
This is the monadology.
Yeah.
First line. Yeah, but it's somehow it's not obscure, but it's very
subtle
what is happening here. And when I say it is beyond, it is because from perception to the monad, one jumps from quantity to quality.
Yes. So perception is basically a quantitative endeavor, and the monad allows one to expand the perception to be also qualitative, or later on, or in some cases can be called the sensuous. It's not always sensuous and qualitative, again, isn't necessarily the same thing.
My translation is slightly different than the one you just read.
Okay, read what you have.
The first paragraph of the monadology is, the monad of which we shall here speak is merely a simple substance, which enters into composites. Simple, that is to say, without parts. And this is the first paragraph of the monadology. The first paragraph of the principle of nature and grace, which goes over exactly the same description, gives a bit more information. So, substance is a being capable of action. It is simple or composite. Simple substance is that which has no parts. Composite substance is the collection of simple substances or monads. And then, going back to the monadology, the third paragraph. Now, when there are no parts, there can be neither extension, nor figure, nor divisibility. So the monad has no extension, doesn't have a body, doesn't have a figure or a shape, so it's not extended in space or time, nor it is divisible. These monads are the veritable atoms of nature, and this is what it seems contradictory. And in one word, the elements of all things. But yet they are not material, and they don't belong to the countable, measurable side of which we just spoke.
So yeah.
No, I had this couple of considerations that I'm not sure I'm right about.
You just got to shout so that Sophie can hear you at the very end.
Yeah. Is there a relation between the monads and imaginary numbers? First of all, does it make sense at all? Because of these.
I would think yes is the answer.
Everything,
yeah. I think that there would be like the square root of -1, that kind of thing.
Because, okay, so this infinite divisibility thing as the reason why Leibniz says that you can't say A equals B, basically.
Yes.
And that's why the empiricists say A equals B, because they don't use the same process, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
So if Leibniz goes beyond with the monads, he kind of goes to the imaginary numbers.
Well,
you know,
yes,
I need much
yes,
more words
he
to
can be,
explain
but
it.
yes, I don't think that's inaccurate. It's just to put it in the context of what's being said right now. A monad is not a chemical periodic table. So it's an element, but it's an element that has no weight or substance or anything.
Yeah.
It's not quite even an energy at that point. So what is it then? So we know what it's not, in the sense that it's not going to be the periodic table.
I'm still trying to work this out fully, but a monad is a fully actualized possibility. Right?
Okay, just hold it right there. A fully actualized possibility. Could that be a work of art? Could this entire painting be a monad?
Yes, but to have very long the two, a very good that would be very delicate.
Very delicate. Yeah, so you can't quite make that leap. Yeah, good. Good, you didn't fall for that. That's excellent. Anybody want to take another step? Because this is good. I don't want you to have to do the entire seminar. What do other people have to say about this monad so far? Sophie, did you have any thoughts on the monad? Did you lose any sleep on monad?
No, I've just never even heard of a monad, so it's
Right. Okay, so obviously we didn't all read the same thing. Okay. Did you read some Leibniz for today? Just not put you on the spot. Okay, that's okay. Anybody read some Leibniz?
When you ask him how to get the monad, he says in the second part of Nature and Grace, nomads have no parts, they could never be either made or unmade, because they would involve their being assembled or disassembled, dismembered, sorry.
Good.
And
So
which would require them to have parts, or just
good. Okay, so what is it then? It's kind of like sounds like charades. is
But
what I'm
then
hearing.
later he goes, they cannot naturally either they cannot naturally either begin or end, and therefore they last forever. That is, as long as the universe, which will alter but will never go out of existence. They can't have shape or size, because for that they would need to have parts. So it kind of just proves what they cannot be by trying to tell what it is. And kind of, I don't know how to say.
Dane, what do you think a monad is?
It's something which is, take away, it's not a spatial temporal thing, it's an all-encompassing, not an entity, but
It's like intensity.
Intensity.
Maybe.
So I have this piece of paper. Can you just hold that edge? Okay. No, it didn't work. Nope, didn't work. We need something special. I got this as a present. Okay. Is that a monad?
no. You can't pierce a monad.
No, not is this a monad. Is this part a monad?
Well, no. She made it. It's been made.
No.
You forget that it's been made.
Okay, if we forget it's been made, we just found it, still is not a monad.
It's not. No.
Okay,
It
so.
belongs in a space, and so that means it has a spatial value to it.
Okay, so that can't be a monad. Okay, anybody want to try something else then? We're getting at what it's not, but what is it? So is it basically ectoplasm without its fake?
Well, according to that, a monad is something that's beyond the level of perception. So it's something that's a marker for something that can't be perceived, but you can think it. So it doesn't have to have any kind of physical presence, or it doesn't have to be a material or an element, but it can be.
And not only does it not have to, it can't be.
It doesn't, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so then what is it then? You're right, okay, it's a marker, but how does it mark?
It attracts things to it, material things to it.
How does it do that? It sounds very hocus
Ephemeral.
pocus. How does that work, the ephemerality of it?
There's no inside, no outside.
Right.
So is it the thing to do with the artwork can't be monad, but the work that art is doing, the work of the art.
Oh, now we're
is
getting
the
warmer.
monad.
Very
It's about
good.
quality as well.
Very good. Want to repeat that again?
So it's not the artwork. The artwork can't be monad, but the work of the art that.
So what art does.
Yes. Yeah.
Or what art is?
Yeah.
Not it's not doing. It's not an action. Okay, we're getting warmer-ish. extreme?
Well, I just mentioned that monads are always, they're internally self-moved, they move, they don't move with regards to other monads, though other monads are reflected within a single monad. It gets really ridiculous.
Did you ever read The Little Prince?
Yeah.
This reminds me of it a little bit, you know, it's like, it's kind of, Little Prince, you all should read this if you haven't read it, where there's a blanket and a form underneath it, and you're asked, what is this? And adults have a very specific...
It's a hat.
It's a hat underneath there.
Yeah. Well, it's a hat, and it's not a hat, it's a
I thought it
boa
was an
snake
elephant.
for a...
Yeah.
It's a boa snake for an elephant.
Yes,
I'm sorry,
exactly.
I looked at
That's right, absolutely. And that's what it sounds like the way what you're discussing the monad at the moment. Okay, while you're all turning to Little Prince, great, but keep going.
Is the black hole a singularity?
It's the momentum. Yes.
Okay, but a momentum is weird because a momentum is already having something. What's happening? He's another drawing. He's overcome with another drawing moment.
Go on, it takes a while.
We get your point. Point.
Speak amongst ourselves. I told Mattia not to show this drawing, but anyway, it's not well on this. It's fine. Go on.
So it causes infinite divisibility. So we think that this is smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Or at the same time, possibilities that are self-contradictory, so they exclude each other until you have the present world today. One option only, all the others have been excluded. Beyond this infinite progression of division or exclusion, you have the set of all possibilities maintained open on a completely different level, which is the metaphysical level of God. Now the monad stays on this side, and this is the material historical world. But this is the way I understand.
So it's like in Aristotle, the sky of the fixed stars.
Yes.
So
Or the first immobile motor of the whole. It draws from Aristotle.
So, what do you do with this? Why is it important that a monad is not quite an Archimedean point? So he's not gone to the view that there's like man, or there's humans or whatever, and then there's this outside element that directs. So there's not an Archimedean point that has everything deal with it. But somehow there's something that is extra to the picture of perception. But if you take it all together, you have the whole point of philosophy. For Leibniz, this is his philosophy in a drawing. And why does that make sense? Or in what way does that make sense? Or does it make sense yet? Now it doesn't make sense.
It's something to do with the excess, though. So that gives you that infinity that you can. I'm
Okay,
sort
well,
of-
Dem
it's contradictory.
mentioned black hole.
Yeah.
Can you explain what a black hole is? Okay, great. You can explain.
Such a condensation of a matter that collapses within itself.
So there's no matter. It's
Kind of
like
so much of a matter that there isn't matter.
there's no matter,
Yeah.
right? And so it
Fine.
is. It's not self.
Yeah, it's become. Yeah, it denies itself, so that's why it's collapsing.
Well, it's not so much denied,
No,
but
well,
it vanishes in its presence. Its presence is its vanishing.
Yeah.
Right. So even that's incorrectly put because it's vanished in its presence. Now, is that the monad? No. Okay, so be careful, because I can understand why you would have gone there, because it seems like something without substance, without speed, without time, that makes sense as a monad. That's black matter, or dark matter, right? But this is not what he's arguing.
Is it like the unstable something? Is it?
It's not, he's not Adorno.
No, but I mean, is it like that? Is it?
No, it's like the
Like-
monad. So what we have to figure out is what is this thing called monad?
It looks a bit like an obstruction to me.
What is this? Is
No, I mean,
like zombies.
Yes.
Follow the fresh blood and
That's
running
hilarious.
towards a building.
Yes.
But I kind of, I think, because going back to the what is real, like what did he believe is real. So we are now in the metaphysic kind of part. The gut,
Ooh,
we are in the
yes.
gut place. For him it's real, isn't it? Because we still think of it as a, maybe it's real.
So would you say,
because we kind
given
of
that,
question it.
very good, go, sorry.
And he takes all those parts as real as, let's say we're holding this like this.
So you're suggesting that this part up to this red business
Yeah.
is physics, as it were,
They're like the kind of
phenomena,
sensible.
and this
like,
is the metaphysics.
in a way, but it's all
so we're getting to
real,
the black hole
right?
then, kind of. I mean, isn't the black hole the place where the laws of physics don't work anymore?
Yes, so
So
down.
kind of we're back there.
It might actually have a position here. Not quite.
Is
Like-
it to do with infinite possibility?
Okay, we're getting warmer here, but not yet there. Lauren, do you have a comment
Oh,
on
it's
this?
just the bit where he's sort of saying, like, he's looking the question of insufficient reason, and then so
Can you
like,
shout? 'Cause
well, he's
the fan
he
went out.
raises the question of insufficient reason. So then he's like sort of, so there's on one side there's efficient causes, and then on the other side there's this aspect of the monad, and then I think the key bit would be where he says, shall I read?
Yeah, where, what page, and what
Oh,
text?
Page 210.
Which paragraph
in,
is it?
No, Nature and Grace.
Oh, Nature and Grace, okay.
What paragraph?
Oh, it's just before the 9.
Hold on one second, let's just, does everybody have access to Nature and Grace? I mean, not in a, here. That's right.
So he's sort of he's looking for the insufficient reason that relates to emergence, really, in a contemporary sense of emergence. And then, so he was sort of wanting to put that on the table, I think. So then he says, thus the sufficient reason, which needs no other reason, must be outside this series of contingent things, which the contingent things relates to the efficient causes aspect side of things, and must be found in a substance which is its cause and which is a necessary being carrying the reason of its existence with itself. I don't know, is
Now,
that
I
what
want
I'm
everyone
thinking?
to
Is that
repeat
the
that
modality?
sentence as a mantra in the morning when you get up. Can you say it again? I don't know if anybody followed that.
So,
No, it's not your fault, it's just a difficult sentence.
thus, the sufficient reason, which needs no other reason, must be outside this series of contingent things, and must be found in a substance which is its cause, and which is a necessary being, carrying the reason of its existence with itself.
Well, don't go to Kant, let's just stick with this guy. What is he basically saying here?
Unfortunately, then says, and this ultimate reason of things is called God. Sorry. Sorry.
And is God then the monad?
Sorry?
God
Well,
is the monad.
I think that sentence I was reading was what the monad.
Yeah? So why is that important for us right now? I mean, unless people are converting,
It's like
which is
that.
conceivable, but not
Because we're
probable.
secular, so God is not in. God can't be the monad, something else has to be the monad. I don't know what the monad is.
That's right, but hey.
Now we know it's
not
not
God.
God.
That's
That's another one on the list.
You have anything to say about this? Your works on this very subject?
Yeah, exactly. So I, because of this, and because there was, as I remember right, there was something like empty space full of monads.
What's full of monads? Monads?
Empty spaces. Empty space or thin space, just on the. It was few paragraphs on the.
The plenum thing.
The- yeah.
Yeah, the fullness.
Yeah, so it's full.
Yeah.
And then it's written.
Okay, he says here.
Okay, yeah. What page are we on?
Oh, God, who knows? Oh, nomad, who knows? No, that's wrong.
See, by the way, I'm
That's-
glad you said the word nomad, because as you know with Deleuze and Guattari, they've developed this thing called nomadology. And it's linked to this monadology. So just nomad, monad, just, we'll circle back to this, but just mark
Okay,
it.
it's a fourth in principles of nature and grace based on reason, and it's paragraph 4. There's a moment. A living thing of this kind is called an animal, and correspondingly, its nomad is called a soul. That's kind
It's
of
nomad.
It's
Yeah,
no,
okay.
monad. Monad.
Monad. Okay, I was
Monad.
going to say, I didn't think it was
Yeah.
a nomad.
No, nomad.
Thinking,
No,
how
mo-
rumors begin. Okay.
Anyway, that's my way of.
Yeah, so say it again.
Where's
Say it
that
again.
bit?
A living thing of this kind, and he's talking here about the feeling and perception, and before it's sentiment and sensation or belief, which also is quite. I marked it, and I'm trying to figure out why I marked it. A living thing of this kind is called an animal. So that's the real. That's the physics, yeah.
Okay. I'm just following your argument, yeah.
And correspondingly, so that's the first one, its monad is called a soul. So it calls a monad a soul, yeah? So that's the, let's say, this.
That's what the soul looks like on
Yes.
some level.
But
Just kidding.
if there is a correspondence
Mhm.
between them, then that means the monad, knowing that monad exists, it's because there is a, I don't want to use the word representation, but there's some sort of representation of it in the animal, so in the real.
Or link.
Or some sort of
It's not wrong.
link.
It's not right, though.
It's not right.
It's not right, and it's not right. It's not quite right.
Yeah.
It's close. It's very
Okay.
close. Can you just, sorry,
I might
can you
say
just
wrong.
repeat, no, just repeat again how you're posing that, because you're so close to this. And I want it to be accurate. I feel like we're doing yoga positions. So
Okay.
you have to be in the right, you have to do it right. It's not gonna work.
So
otherwise.
a soul and animal.
This is animal.
This is animal.
This is soul.
This is a soul.
Okay.
And monad.
Mhm.
This damn
No
thing.
mad.
Monad.
No, monad. Oh, God,
Yeah.
that was really.
Not potato.
It's okay, I can't say polygama.
Jubaba. Jubaba. Yeah. Monad, which is a soul. There is a correspondence between an animal and its monad. Yeah. So the monad, as knowing that the monad exists in a way, or as recognizing its existence, is because we can. And now I will know why I marked that before. Because, but anyway.
No, why?
No, I'm gonna get that. Well, not, and I'm gonna forget about it. Monad, we recognize its existence because it is, and again, I'm using consciously represented. I don't want to use that word because I don't think it, but represented in a.
Don't use that word because it's
yeah.
not the correct word on there. So try and find, we'll just say or something at the moment.
We have a sensation of it in the real.
Okay, that's better.
We have.
Because it's not being represented.
It's actual.
Yeah, it is
Yes.
much,
Instead of virtual,
it's not,
yes.
it's not standing in for something. Or if it is represented, it's represented, as in,
Or we
it's
have an
reiterated.
Certain, he has a quote, certain echo remains
Yeah.
from it. So, maybe, but that also links to like, we have a monad.
Hasn't to do with the difference concept, the thing of different but the same.
No,
No,
no, but, oh, sorry.
In my drawing, this is supposed to be solid, completely solid,
Yeah.
and this becomes more and more rarified. But the partition can also be seen as two different kind of causes. This is efficient cause,
Oh yeah, he talks about this.
as in a deterministic chain of causes, very physical. In fact, pushing forward, and this instead is the final cause. The reason why things exist rather than not. So this supports everything else, because this metaphysical side acts as a ground for all these partition
Observed monads are necessary.
Self-necessary. And the last one is God, that is a monad.
So they're necessary and sufficient.
Yes.
But then they need God.
God is a self-created monad, not as created as monads. I mean, it sounds there is a bit of a fairy tale element in it, because, but logically, it's much more cohesive.
Okay, so in number 7 of the principle, I don't know what page we're all using different books at this point, but in Nature and Grace, to start where Mattia had said, you know, the question is, why is there something rather than nothing? Now, that's kind of an interesting question, because, you know, there's a whole other move, it's just there is nothing rather than something. You can start with nothing as opposed to something. So here he's starting with something as opposed to nothing. Now, in that, he says basically, so far I have spoken only of what goes on in the natural world. Now I must move up the metaphysical level, move up to the metaphysical level by making use of a great, though not very widely used principle, which says that nothing comes about without a sufficient reason. That, for example, for any true proposition P, it is possible for someone who understands things well enough to give a sufficient reason why it is the case that P rather than not P. Given that principle, the first question we can fairly ask, which is what Mattia had pointed out, why is there something rather than nothing? After all, nothing is simpler and easier than something. Also, given that things have to exist, we must be able to give a reason why they have to exist as they are and not otherwise. So he's starting with what is. And he's saying the what is not an absence. One inhabits the what is. One inhabits the here. So the very first radicality of Leibniz that you have to get a sense of is that he's very practical in this sense. He's saying this is what is. I'm not asking how come it came about, what were the backgrounds to the question, not yet. I'm saying we start with where we are. It's like he predates the Wizard of Oz and Dorothy. How does she go on her travel? Glinda the witch says you start where you are. That's your journey begins precisely where you are. It doesn't begin where you've never been. It begins where you are. And from that position, he arrives at the question of the monad. So what I want to make sure you're getting a sense of is you start with the here and now and all that that implies. So that's why I don't want you to divide off monology from the here and now in this example. You're starting with the here and now. That here and now includes this monad. It's not that the monad is away from that, but to grasp it, so the logic of grasping is different than the actuality of dealing with it. And he's going to get into the logic of what happens to this way in which this level of the monad is going to operate in the structure of the here and now. Because otherwise one has to wonder, what makes him so interesting? And how has he survived all these centuries? Because he does sound like he's just a religious fanatic in the end. And maybe he is a religious fanatic, but his fanaticism seems to have survived in a way that is odd, I would think. Mark, did you want to say anything on this? Because you were flipping through some pages.
No, I think Jacob really stuck it together quite nicely.
Did I? Well, thank you.
I think it was very well put. There's a similar piece in section 63 of the Monadology. It talks about the soul and the monad, that whole passage.
Can you read it out loud? Is that all right?
63. A body belonging to a monad, which is the entelechy, or soul of that body, together with an intellect, constitutes what we call a living being, and together with soul constitutes what is called an animal. Now, the body of a living being or an animal is always organised, and since every monad is a mirror of the universe in its way, and since the universe is regulated in perfect order, there must be
Wait, slower.
in the representing being, that is, in the perceptions of the soul, and consequently in the body in accordance with which the universe is represented therein.
Pardon me, can you just tell me again what number it was?
63 in the
Oh, 63, okay, right, yeah.
This whole passage, this 60s, quite interesting.
Yeah, that's
in terms of the monad.
62 lines.
Can you read out 62?
Well, it refers back to 18 as well.
Yeah.
Which is where I was beginning to think, is it something about that energy that happens that is between things that creates that excess that has a growth to it, and that's what we were talking about in the work of art.
Mm-hmm.
So because the universe is within every monad, yet it's not exactly the same. So there's always a difference that sort of creates more things. So it's sort of
All I'm cautioning everybody is be careful. He's not Hegelian here. He's not going to have these division. He's not going to have this kind of. Well, even Hegel doesn't really have a vision that I'm posing it right now. But he's not going to have either this or that. It's much more of a fluid, odd. What's that?
It's always there.
It's always there. Yes.
So it's not that I'm thinking there is no something. It's always there. The metaphysical, the soul is there. It's like as physical as everything else. That's what we kind of tries to say.
The element, the monad is solidity in front of all this infinite possibility of division. Also acts as the initial ripple of differentiation, because all these by itself somehow would act like the atoms of the Greek atomistics. It precipitates forever to eternity in the void. It doesn't altogether. It doesn't have any differentiation. It's just constantly subdivided into smaller and smaller parts. It is the monad that gives one form of differentiation rather than another. So around the monad you have conglomerates or composites of matter that become the body of an animal, the body of a person with more sophisticated soul attached to it. I wish I thought of it all by myself, but it comes from a comment of Gregory Chaikin that says that the most important monad, God, is used by Leibniz to introduce an initial degree of complexity on which the existing distribution of an otherwise infinite subdivision can take place.
Brilliant. Yes. Can you repeat that?
So
Because that's why at least this group will find some, I think, solace or even encouragement from Leibniz. He's not reinventing fundamentalism here. He's doing something else with this thing of the monad, and it has to do with the question of complexity.
So let's put it like that. So go back to the beginning. The matter, the world reality is infinitely divisible. So you never reach anything solid. No ground to stand on, no reason for things beside the fact that something pushes
It's
something
here.
else.
Yeah, right.
And like purely mechanic, sort of dry and blind. Then how can one justify the fact that there is one distribution of things rather than another? That we've got two legs, one head, two eyes, and so forth, that capitalism or something else. Well, how can you explain that? Well, it is the product of a long chain of efficient causes, but the initial push comes from this initial ripple into the Higgs boson that rips through and turns energy into body.
The God particle.
Yeah, the God particle.
So the monad is the God particle.
The more Higgs boson is the God particle in this sense. I mean,
great.
But
I like that.
The initial degree of complexity is what I found was a very, very useful way of putting it. Leibniz was certainly religious, but is far more interested in the order of things on the reality than so much than all the rest theodicy, justice of God, is important because this work is the best of the possible world, the best of the honest. No, it doesn't go any further than this work. So it is the initial degree of complexity that brings two things together, therefore it can gain some gravity. So therefore we can attract a third and then a fourth and become composite, and then another compound and then become element, and then the world exists. And the two are constantly coexisting together. And somewhere else, I can't remember exactly now, it says that the monads are constantly created by the continuous figuration of God. So they exist out of time, and they work as what biology would call strange attractors in bringing together matter.
But I guess what I'm trying to make sure people don't do is have like the conception of the monad as, I don't know, the Elysian fields or something, where there's a whole other set of demigods or whatever, or a whole other party going on above the world that then has implications or not, A, or B, has this one God that is external to everything. So he's breaking with both of those. He's breaking with a kind of a form of paganism, and he's breaking with a form of universal God that never changes over time. And that's interesting. And he manages to maintain this. Actually, there's a book, it's a new book out, but it's by Leotard, who's dead. So, I mean, anyway, there's a new book called The Hyphen, H-Y-P-H-E-N. And it's Leotard does this lengthy analysis of the dash, the hyphen, between Judeo and Christian. And he works it through using Leibniz's Monadology. It's a very interesting piece. And he asked the question, why is it Judeo-Christian as opposed to any other version? Is it actually because first there was the Jewish religion and then there's the Christian religion, and why isn't it Judeo-Christian Muslim and so on and so forth? So he has this, so he's interested in this dash, in this hyphen. I've got a copy that I'm bringing in from the library, so you can take a look at it, but it's worth in respect to this. Okay, so how are we doing now? We're doing good. So it's complex. This I mean, I don't mean complexity. I mean it's complicated how this is operating. Are there any other ways into this, do you think? You've done a very, I mean, I was thinking everybody was going to first up, you've done a very good introduction. I think this has been very useful. I think. Has it been helpful? Yes.
Sorry. How is Leibniz pagan?
Oh, Leibniz isn't pagan.
So it's religious, like with revelated truths.
Yeah. He's
okay. There's no paganism in his.
No. These people are not pagan at all. Yeah, Dane.
I was going to expand on something.
Yeah, can you expand?
Well, Leibniz says that everything has monads, but there's three different types of monads. So there's called the bare monads, which are like inanimate matter, soul nomads, which are the animals that have, he defines having desire. That's what defines a soul. And there's the spirit, which he says is the mind or human soul, which can perceive itself. But these are all types of monads, and in everything, like a book, it's a collection of bare monads, and they're all essentially living matter. They all have their own perceptions of the universe. They all move internally. So everything has a sort of a life essence that moves itself. And that's what I find interesting with relation to my own art practice, how a material has its own life, its own movement within itself, can work within itself, not just based on its physicality or materiality.
Yeah, brilliant point. Because it's like listening to what the object is telling you. Yes, that's very important. Can you find out can you cite where he says these, where he presents the, I mean, it's obviously in the Monadology, but.
I'd have to.
Okay, so the three types, so to push you a little further on this, that was very good. Benjamin's going to take up on this, on the aura and so on, that you learn how to understand what it is to be in tune with the object, what is the object saying to you, without assuming that you're putting superstitious moment into it. Okay, because Nietzsche has a different position, of course, on this view, but anyway. How come he comes up with 3 and not 37 types of monads? What would you think is the reason for that? Is it just a conceit that he just says there are 3 and here they are?
It's almost going back to the Holy Trinity then.
It is a bit, isn't it?
I have here is the in 48.
Yeah, which number 48 of the Monadology?
40, yes. In God.
Wait.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Oh yeah.
In God there is power, which is the source of everything. Then knowledge, which contains every single idea, and then finally will, which produces changes in accordance to the principle of what is best. And these are what correspond, respectively, to what is created. So what in created monads constitute a subject obeys faculty of perception and appetitive faculty. So I think it's that.
No, you go to the very next line.
But in God, those attributes are absolutely infinitive and perfect, whereas in created monads, there are only imitations of the divine attributes, imitations that are more or less close depending on how much perfection they possess.
So in that section that you're looking at, that you put on the table, it sounds like there's a monad, it sounds like the God monad is a different monad than the other 3 that you pointed out. So there are 4 monads then. Is that accurate?
Sounds
Take it through.
God, I suppose, is the only one that can move other monads, because he's the one that's coordinating them and bring them into relation to affect each other. The other monads don't interact in that sort of level.
Close, but not yet. Yes.
Well, that's correct. And monads are mirroring themselves in God. They don't act horizontally.
But there's one extra element to this thing.
Well, it's that God is infinity. The monads have the most the most perfect. It sounds like a contradiction, but to Leibniz, being in time and space equals to a form of limitation. Therefore, there can be no perfection to what exists in time and space. In the realm of the monad, which is not extension, but is intensity, the full unfolding of possibility exists in actual form, but it's purely logic, it's a logical. So on that level, that's God, and God has all the possibilities and all the realization open, like an immense amount of RAM on a computer can have all the memory open once, all the possibilities functions at the same time. While the distances in history and reality, crossing point of time and space, are one of those, and are automatically excluding all the other options. So God is infinitely perfect and infinitely right, and each instance is partially perfect and partially right. Doesn't mean that there is some amount of wrong in it, it's not complete.
Yeah, so right means correct.
Correct, which then matches completely with an ethical side, but I haven't touched that.
Yeah, let's not go there yet, because we haven't gotten this yet. It's been very good entry points. Stuart?
I was just thinking, so going back to, is it Wittgenstein talking about where everything that ever has been and ever will be existed? Is that what is being said?
Are you saying Wittgenstein?
Was it?
No, it wasn't Wittgenstein.
No, like in the groundless grounds.
Oh, in the groundless grounds.
There was
Okay.
that thing about, was it in?
Here, here's the book. See if you can see.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't know where
Okay.
but it was just, weren't we sort of talking about that idea? Isn't that what's being implied there? Is God monad? That's
All there is there ever will be, and whatever will be is already
is already laid out.
But it's not laid out as in, this is your destiny. It's laid out in the fact that all possibilities that could ever be invented are invented.
So is it then that these other three?
So it's not destiny, in other
No.
words. You know, it's free will.
Yes, yeah.
Which is
But
very
it's
different.
sorry,
It's just said that the monads have free will. The matter that responds to the monad doesn't have free will. It's subject to the monad's free will. And that free will is a second decree of rules that are subservient to God. So they have
Very
free will.
creepy, isn't it?
They have free will, but they don't have God's free will.
So far we don't really know what this bloody monad is, you know, but.
And now we say that God is.
That's right, my God is a monad.
Leibniz was contemporary of Newton. He was in continuous correspondence with Clarke, who was Newton's alter ego for correspondence with Leibniz. And they hated each other, especially Newton towards Leibniz.
And why is it just
well,
do you think it's just
Newton,
professional jealousy?
The more one reads about Newton, the more one discovers Newton was really a rotten person. In the particular instance is that Leibniz invented and published the calculus at a certain point. Newton apparently had devised it earlier but never published it, and then accused Leibniz of stealing his new method.
See, things really don't change, actually. It's accurate.
But
yeah.
what is interesting is that in thinking of the models and all the open possibilities in God's mind, or all the open possibilities being God himself, can be also explained with the notion of determinism that comes out of Newton's laws. Newton mechanicism, which was really thinking that the bottom of reality is that there are objects that push each other and therefore go somewhere else. If one could calculate it precisely enough, one could not only backtrack all the previous movements, but predict all the future movements. So a mind powerful enough and precise enough could have a picture of the universe as an eternal present, because you could see exactly why everything happened and where it would go. And this is the mechanics, scientific expression of his laws to the infinity of
Newton's law. Yeah, yeah.
Now, I see that there is the image that Leibniz is building of God here is very, very similar to this. Newton in it doesn't, I haven't done it, but in what I glean, that God doesn't enter the immediacy of the scientific laws of motion that he is describing. But it really matches perfectly the idea of all possibilities being actual at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a parallel there. I think it might be might be useful to use the three laws of motion of Newton to understand what Leibniz means by all the possibilities, all the possible as actual in God.
Kind of has a flux particle as well in Newton. Is it material matter or something like that? Sounds a bit like the ones.
Well, be careful. The God particle really is a much more recent. As
Yeah,
much
yeah,
as I
yeah,
think that you could find examples of something like that. Other questions, because I think that this might be the right time to decide what we're reading. I think we really need to reread, now really read, the Monadology. I think that, I'm just wondering, I mean, I think that now we've got a pretty good basis of realizing what we really don't know yet, and so let's read that in Nature and Grace, those two. And who would like to be kind of the backbone of the seminar for next week? Okay, Jakob, that's great.
I knew that. I knew if I said quiet today,
Yes.
I would not have to do it.
That's right. And who else would like to do it? Would you like to do it?
Me.
Liz? Oh, just say yes. What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah.
See?
Commercial.
Is that Dr. Pepper?
Dr. Pepper commercials, right? Yeah.
Wow.
When he suddenly kills her father. Yeah.
When he kills his partner.
Her father. So he comes, the daughter introduces her boyfriend to the father, and he trips or something happens, and
their father asks him, would you like Dr. Pepper?
The
He's
worst
like,
thing.
all right. And then suddenly he somehow kills the father or something happens. Yeah.
Wow.
It's like,
So
what the
we'll have
was
these
that?
monads knocking on the door.
Yeah, that's right. We can all dress as a monad,
Talk about
you
monads.
know,
What's that
for
gonna
our
happen?
seminar.
It's monads.
You know, I think that's great. You know, you met Frank, you know, the one that did all the mad maths on here. He went to a Halloween party the other year as a tube of KY jelly, and and it was just the funniest thing. And for some reason, that image makes me think of what a monad could be. We could just dress as various tubes of KY jelly, except we'd be a monad. That's not going to work, and I'm really sorry for that. And I'm sorry, Frank, because I know that that's probably very embarrassing for people to know that. Okay, it's early, so I'm willing to entertain other ideas. I just thought that we'd come to a certain moment. So I think that, yes, good, no, bad, all good, all bad, okay, good. No expressions. So, great. So we'll do Leibniz for real next week. Not that we did do it for real now. That was really a good introduction, particularly since you weren't prepared. So I just think what would happen if you'd actually worked on it. And I think that just try and get a sense of how one thinks about an environment, or you know, kind of a curved time environment. I was going to say spatiality, or that is to say something that can admit a monad scenario without bringing in a division. Is it possible for you to try and think in that way? I think we got pretty close with Dane. Try and think about how one can establish where this monad lives, as it were. I mean, are we saying that the monad is in heaven or something like that? So we have this notion of heaven, or we have this notion of another, you know, place. Because I think this is a very good example, a very good diagram. My fear is always that because of this bar,
It looks like a border.
it looks like a border. And the thing that's really hard to get your head around with Leibniz, or anybody that's talking about this, is how one constructs difference without the line. Without this.
Rather than a border, this is solid, and this instead is constantly in progressive exclusion of possibilities. If anything, it is an asymptotic tangent point between perfection and extension.
Right, so if it's asymptotic, it's still not going to have the kind of boundary that the image is presenting. I think it's a very good stab at trying to get at this original thing, but what happens is that you can easily deduce from this a position here and a position coming up to there and knocking on the door and saying, let me in, you know, or something like that, or the other way around, I'm going to get you, you know, and that's not quite, it's not wrong, but it's not quite there yet. So you just need to sit with this a little bit. You need to like sit by the river, or sit by a bottle of wine, or sit somewhere, and just try and understand this monad business. Yeah? Yay. Good. Drinks for all. I told Lee that you guys go to a certain pub. It's the Lost and Found, right?
That's where I went when I was first.
It's the old joints.
Yeah,
Oh, it's the old joints? Where is that?
It's the one just opposite the cathedral. Oh, yeah, it's at the theatre.
It's the big old one that was it's got a theatre attached. It's really nice. It was the
Hilarious. Lauren calls it the Exchange. Like, you thought that it was Lost and Found, and we go there every week. It's called.
It's not called Exchange.
No.
It was an exchange. It was. That's the building, isn't it?
That's so funny.
Yeah, it was.
Because, I mean, one of the things I had to do with Lee today was do this induction. And one of the things on the induction, they say, where do people normally have tea? So this is the version of tea. So I was saying, you have to go to Lost and Found, you know, but obviously you would have only had 10. You would have fine, but not enough. It's funny. Okay, see you next week. Oh, yeah. I, no. Right, it's on the Dropbox now.
Good.
The new group.